In today's video, I will be discussing stretcher bearers and a sub-tangent on World War I Australian proto-men. I had a few requests from friends to make this video, so here we go. In the early stages of the war, stretcher bearers were often drawn from regimental bandsmen or soldiers considered unfit for frontline combat. Many lacked proper medical training and initially operated under the outdated belief that wounded men should simply be carried to doctors as quickly as possible. This system quickly proved inadequate in trench warfare, where casualties frequently died during transport due to severe bleeding or shock. The transformation of stretcher bearers into trained battlefield medical personnel was one of the most important developments of the war. By 1915, training programs increasingly focused on hemorrhage control, splinting fractures, patient stabilization, and organized evacuation systems. Stretcher bearers evolved into specialists capable of making life or death medical decisions under extreme pressure. The work of a stretcher bearer was far more dangerous and physically demanding than many people realized. Their job was not simply carrying wounded men from one place to another. Stretcher bearers had to move directly into combat zones, often under artillery fire or machine gun fire, searching shell holes, collapsed trenches, and craters for wounded soldiers. Many casualties were trapped in exposed areas where ordinary infantry could not safely remain for long periods. Once a wounded man was found, the stretcher bearers had to lift him onto a stretcher and begin the long journey back through the destroyed terrain. This was incredibly difficult because the Western Front had been transformed into a landscape of deep mud, shattered trenches, barbed wire, and water-filled craters. Carrying a full-grown man while navigating the environment required intense strength and coordination. Every step risked slipping, falling, or exposing themselves to enemy fire. In many cases, stretcher bearers spent hours moving casualties from front line to aid stations or casualty clearing stations. Their duties also involved basic medical care during evacuation. They gave wounded men water, attempted to comfort them, and used shell dressings to control bleeding, while trying to move them as carefully as possible. Stretcher bearers were one of the most essential groups on the Western Front. They entered battlefields immediately after men were wounded and became responsible for keeping casualties alive long enough to reach proper medical treatment. Stretcher bearers should be understood as early paramedics. They controlled bleeding, stabilized fractures, monitored wounded men during evacuation, and developed practical frontline medical techniques, long before modern emergency medicine formally existed. According to Dr. Emily Mayhew, many medical practices now consider standard, treating patients before transport, stabilizing trauma victims in the field, and maintaining care during evacuation can be traced directly back to stretcher bearers during the First World War. Another major reason stretcher bearers became so respected was because of the psychological impact their presence had on frontline soldiers. Men fighting in the trenches knew that if they were wounded, someone would still come for them, even under artillery, machine gun fire. That sense of reassurance mattered enormously in an environment where many soldiers already felt trapped by mud, exhaustion, disease, and constant shelling. Stretcher bearers represented hope in situations where hope was often difficult to find. Their work also required extraordinary endurance. Many stretcher teams carried wounded men for miles through deep mud and shattered terrain while exhausting themselves, often making repeated trips back into dangerous areas throughout the night. The physical emotional strain of the work became one of the defining realities of battlefield medicine during the First World War. Much of the equipment was basic, portable, and designed for emergency use in battlefield conditions. Every item carried by stretcher bearers served a practical purpose because supplies had to be transported across dangerous terrain while under fire. For example, a small canteen cup was given to stretcher bearers. This simple act of giving casualty a drink became an emotionally significant moment for comfort. Contents of the surgical haystack included, this doesn't get very boring, loose woven bandages, triangular bandages. The bearer's dressing case held a long bladed clasp knife, forceps, pin cushion pins, safety pins, probe and director plated, scissors, spatula, thread, vulcanite case holding needles, gauze double cyanide, hypodermic case holding syringes, needles, cocaine tablets, plaster, silk twisted, specification tallies, splints, splint, I don't know how to say that, tin containing wax, small screw tourniquets, wool bork, and 2.0 ounce packets, waterproof canvas bag holding everything, and previously stated a canteen with drinking cup. Trench foot became one of the most common medical problems on the Western Front because soldiers spent days or even weeks standing in cold water and mud without the opportunity to properly dry their feet. Constant moisture cut off circulation and damaged tissue, causing swelling, numbness, infection, and eventually gangrene. Trench foot showed how environmental factors could be just as dangerous as enemy weapons. Soldiers often fought not only against the Germans themselves, but also against the trench system because of the mud, the rats, the cold, disease, and exhaustion. Preventing trench foot became a major concern for officers and medical staff who ordered soldiers to regularly change socks and rub whale oil onto their feet. However, frontline conditions frequently made proper prevention impossible. Stretcher bearers did not only evacuate the wounded, they also dealt directly with the dead. Ration bags were sometimes used to carry personal belongings of soldiers who had been killed. These items included watches, rings, letters, Bibles, and photographs, all of which had to be cataloged and returned whenever possible. The duty exposed stretcher bearers to the deeply personal and emotional side of death in the field. Gas warfare introduced an entirely new type of fear to the battlefield, because the threat was often invisible and could silently spread across trenches. When soldiers suddenly heard rattles or shouted warnings of gas, 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 every second mattered because soldiers had only moments to protect themselves before the chemicals reached their trench positions. The process of putting on a gas mask had to be completed rapidly and correctly under extreme stress. Soldiers removed their helmets, secured a gas mask over their faces, and replaced the helmets while trying not to inhale contaminated air. Training drills became essential because of hesitation or mistakes could lead to agonizing injury or death. Some of the items they used to protect themselves from gas were, at first, simple gas hoods. They were simple cloth hoods treated with anti-gas chemicals and featured 1 or 2 eyepieces for vision. This is the first variant. As you can tell, 1 eyepiece. And this is the second variant. As you can tell, 2 eyepieces. Then they later had actual gas masks, called small box respirators. The physical effects of poison gas are horrific and deeply frightening. The men exposed to gas often suffered burning eyes, damaged lungs, violent coughing, choking, and temporary blindness. Soldiers who failed to seal their gas masks properly would collapse within minutes, while others suffered long-term respiratory damage that followed them for the rest of their lives. The fear of surrounding gas warfare came partly from its unpredictability. A soldier could survive artillery barrages and machine gun fire, yet still be incapacitated by drifting clouds. Even after surviving an attack, men often remained anxious about future exposure. For my Australian tangent, this primarily goes for tunneler companies. One chief problem faced by those that were digging tunnels on the Western Front was that of carbon monoxide gas, which was released into the earthworks following the detonation of explosive charges. Experienced engineers were frequently caught unaware of the gas being odorless and tasteless, and unprotected men were often casualties as they tried to rescue comrades. To combat this threat, the most up-to-date mining equipment was attained. Manufactured by a civilian contractor, Sibyl Gorman, who had made such equipment since 1902 for the mining industry, a self-contained breathing apparatus, the proto-recycled exhaled carbon monoxide into the chest-mounted breathing bag, purified it with sodium carbonate, and with the aid of oxygen contained into cylinders permitted the man to have clear air for breathing. By regulating the amount of oxygen stored in the bottles, a skilled man could work in a contaminated environment for over 2 hours. The proto self-contained breathing apparatus comprises a chest-mounted canvas-covered breathing bag, oxygen cylinders, supply tubes, a nose clip, a mouthpiece, and a skull cap. Thank you for watching. If you would like to see more, click the videos on the left and the right. If any of the video suggestions or questions, comment them below. Have a great day.